Mock drafts are silly. Here's why.
Green 18! Green 18! Hut!
Hey folks, Steve here at Steve Diddy NFL at the Paddy Packer on Instagram. And we're back for another 10-minute Tuesday. And this one is one I've kind of been looking forward to forever. It's one of those things, it's one of those things I just know, and that was a bugbear for me. But I finally sat down and did some number crunching. And I'm here to talk about mock drafts. Now, should I have been doing this far sooner? Yeah, but we had to break down the Packers draft, and I guess that comes into this whole discussion as well. I only have 10 minutes, and I don't want to get too detailed on the video, even though I can use graphics and all that fancy stuff. But basically, I'm here to talk about mock drafts and why we do them and what my problem is with mock drafts. Because who cares, right? It's a bit of fun, and I get that, right? I get the excitement, we're starved of football for so long, and then we sit down and we get to sort of sift through players and imagine that player landing on our team. But ultimately, and I don't know whether this is just speaking as a Packers fan, it doesn't work out the way we expect that it's going to work out. Whether it's, especially from, being over in the UK and Ireland, you stay up really, really late to watch the draft, and then they end up trading out anyway, and there's moves and shakes. But I guess I'm here to talk about the premise of a mock draft and the sort of, the mock draft gurus out there. And again, not to attack anybody in particular, that's not what this video is about. It's more about what is a mock draft and why do we bother doing it? Is there much point in doing it? And how did the experts get on when they look to try to do their mock drafts? Now, these are guys who are paid to do the job, and I wouldn't knock them for it. I wouldn't attack them for it at all. I'm just sort of trying to highlight just how difficult it is to do it and kind of the drawbacks as to what can happen with a mock draft. Now, the things that we do here at UK Packers is we have our draft guide. Myself and Peter Jones and Andy Davies, we sit down every year, and the two boys, study their tape, and they come out with this big board and players that would potentially be good for the Packers. And we discuss kind of when we go down through who's the dream picks, who would be a shock, and, if we got this player, what would that mean? And that to me is useful. So when these experts come out with stuff, like their top 100 and top 50 and top 10s, that's usually dictated by, tape, stuff that happened on the field, coupling it with character issues. These guys have a wealth of experience. But where I think it falls down is when it comes to actually slotting those players in from 1 to 32. And even more ridiculous is when it comes in from rounds 1 to 7. So what I'm going to do is what I find is that, there's people banging out mock drafts all over the place, but I don't really know of a place or a time or a person or whoever went and got those mock drafts and figured out how everybody got on, right? Because ultimately every year you have trades. So you have some mock drafts that try to take account of fictitious trades, and then you have mock drafts that don't. But ultimately they always happen and you can't predict them. So what can happen to a mock draft is that if there's a shock at pick 2, you're screwed. I mean, your whole mock draft's gone off. So what is the point in doing them? So let's have a look. So if we look at NBC, to summarize, they got 6 correct and 26 incorrect. 7 of their picks weren't even in the first round, and 1 was in the third round. So that's an 18.75% success rate, which, if you go to college and you sit an exam, it's an F. So, not to get too granular about it, they got the first pick right, which is a lock for everybody. So, although they got 6 correct, 5. So from pick 2, they went Justin Herbert to the Miami Dolphins. They said that they traded up, and there was loads of convoluted stuff with this. So they literally went wrong from pick 2. If I could have a big buzzer, a big horn that went off, it'd be going off right about now. So let's check in on Bleacher Report. This looked like it was going okay until we got to the 19th pick, when, there was Trayvon Diggs was put in there, who was drafted in the second round by the Cowboys. But again, first 3 picks went well. And then after that point, it's just a mass of red and yellows of everything that went wrong. At the end of the day, 7 correct, 25 incorrect, 7 were not even in the first round, and 3 of those picks were actually selected in the third round. So not only is it massively incorrect, it's 21% success rate, 22% if we round it up, which again is an F. The New England Patriots select Yetur Gross Matos, who went in the third round, for instance. didn't pan out too well there. So let's onwards and upwards. Mel Kiper. This is a guy who gets an awful lot of stick for getting stuff wrong. Has an awful lot of good analysis. But again, the impossibility of trying to pick from 1 to 32 is insane. From going anywhere into the second and third round is just manky because you get one bad pick. And a real telltale sign about all these mock drafts is that you have version 1. So the NFL season and the college season ends. And then you have a version 1. And then a version 2. And then a version 3. I mean, what's changed with these college players? Has he got worse sitting on the couch at home? I just find that a bit ludicrous. But Mel Kiper did 5 versions of a mock draft. And the one that I could find was number 4. But from reading different articles, he had the same success rate on his 5th one. Again, not knocking Mel Kiper. I'm saying that this whole exercise is an impossibility. Picks 1 and 2 are fine. And then from 3 onwards, it goes downhill. 6 correct for Mel. 26 incorrect. 8 were not even in the first round. And 2 were in the third round. So again, comes in with an 18.75% success rate. Now, if you were to come home to your parents after doing an exam and you got 19% in your exam, it wouldn't bode too well for you. So Daniel Jeremiah, again, actually did quite well in the sense that the picks were kind of mixed around by different teams. He ends up with 8 correct, which is better than the other guys. 24 incorrect. 4 were not in the first round and 1 was in the third round, which is Josh Jones, which kind of fooled everybody. But again, not too bad, I guess, in the sense that there was only 5 that weren't actually supposed to be in his first round that he's put in there. First 3 picks, great. The rest of that is just a wash with red. Again, at the end of the day, if the exercise is to try slot players to teams where you think they're going to go, well then only 8 of those are correct, which is a 25% success rate. Again, the mammy at home is not going to be happy. The best one by far is Peter King. Peter King comes out with 11 correct, 21 incorrect. 7 were not even in the first round and 2 were in the third round. Again, the people that were getting fooled by was Yetur Gross-Matos and Josh Jones in that one. So Peter King, the best of the bunch with a 34% success rate. Let's round it up to 35, and he still got pretty peed off parents. So the premise of mock drafts is silly. To try and predict 32 players to where they're going to fall, because one of the trends that I seen when doing this analysis is that not only if you screw it up by 1 pick, it has a chain reaction and knock-on effect, but players at wildly different positions were being touted for, there was a tight end for the Packers, for instance. Now again, the Packers selecting Jordan Love wasn't something that really anybody predicted. So that's probably a bad example. But I mean, the Saints picking a center, but then elsewhere an expert picks them having a wide receiver. Whereas other times it's offensive versus defensive, so they pick them going offensively and they actually go defensive. It's almost impossible, which makes me ask the question, why are we doing this? Why is there a massive industry for this stuff when the experts consistently get it horrendously wrong? 6 correct, 8 correct, 7 correct. Peter King coming out on top with 11. And when I was doing the analysis, I was like, geez, he did really well. But then you realise that, it's a 34% success rate, which isn't great. And again, not knocking these guys who do it. An awful lot of the stuff that they come out with is fantastic analysis. And that's why I think the shift should totally be towards big boards and letting me and all of the people who don't study it in depth, who the players are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and what your team would get if they went for them. And my main issue with it is, and whatever about the accountability of people coming out with mock drafts and not being called on it, because it's like, being blamed for not picking the lotto numbers. It's incredibly difficult to do. Is what it does is there's a media narrative that goes and gets spun then, where a team is a lock to pick a certain position, which was the Packers with wide receiver, or that certain teams are going to pick a certain player because they're high on him or they've been interviewing him or whatever. An awful lot of that's just conjecture. So then what ends up happening is, and what did happen in our case with the Packers, is that we go a different direction. And then it sends the fan base into a frenzy. So we go and pick Jordan Love and we trade up. And then people get really annoyed and online abuse gets rancid. And then by different teams. And then when people do mock drafts deep into the 7th round, they have these same 4 players that keep showing up all the time, like Ezra Cleveland or Josh Jones or whoever. Justin Jefferson, we're supposed to trade up and get him. When that doesn't happen, and then the knock-on effect impacts and teams trade around the place, they pick different players. We miss our 4th round selection because we traded it away to move up. And then the knock-on effect of other players that are high on the Packers brass board, they go. So then they go to their next best available, which wasn't even on anybody's radar, be it expert or fan. And we end up picking AJ Dillon. And then people get worked up into a froth again and go crazy. And then, DeGore comes up and then we pick him. And then people just go insane. And it just perpetuates. And then everybody's annoyed. And then for an awful lot of time, people either spend their time on one side of the fence, either saying how insanely crap everything is, or how there might be a silver lining. And we lose what's important, which is that these players are people and they just end up getting absolutely trashed the minute they get signed by the team, booed and just abused online. And I know there's people out there saying, no, I don't do that. I know you don't do it, but it does happen. So it just destroys this young lad's dream of the NFL. And also, it's that simmering explosion to everybody kind of coming down and going, okay, yeah, I can kind of see how some of these picks make sense and how they might be able to contribute to the long-term success of the organisation. And how these might actually be good players in their own right. Like talking about AJ Dillon just becoming he's a human bowling ball. This guy just destroys people, breaks ankles. So I think, we miss that then when we get worked up into a frenzy and a froth when we don't get the players that the media have told us that we need. So mock drafts and picking one player for one team, the minute that goes out of kilter, and we saw it with NBC in this analysis, pick 2 and it's wrong. You can try to get inventive and pick trades, but it's all bad. So I don't think there's any need for mock drafts. And especially if you're not an expert as to what the other team's needs are, I think that makes it pointless. And then you just don't know how highly they value their own players. Like if we look at the Packers, they're obviously pretty high on the wide receiver core as it stands. Their game plan is not to be so high on wide receivers and to go with the run game. So there's so much different consideration that goes into selecting players for the draft and for your roster. And I just think that's impossible for all 32 teams when they're going to trade around the place, move up and move down and have different people on their big board, not unless you're in that conference room or conference call. And these scouts have been doing this. And now I know it gets people's back up when people say, this is their job, this is what they do, what do we know? And they're like, yeah, well, look at the past with the draft and look how well they've done and tell me how much better they are than what I am. And that may be true, but at the end of the day, there's scouts out there that have been watching some of these players for years. So there's some credence in that, But anyway, what do I know? I'm just a paddy, but I've done the number crunching. It doesn't look good. I don't like mock drafts, so can we put this stuff to bed? It's a bit of fun and it's a great talking point, but, let's not take it too seriously. Anyway, I've been at SteeDD NFL. This has been the UK Packers 10 Minute Tuesday, all about mock drafts. The new podcast is out as well. It's talking about the schedule release, and it also talks about our, I'm not going to say impending trip to the States because we don't know if that's going to happen yet. But do check it out on iTunes, SoundCloud and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. But until next week, you'll see me back here again for 10 Minute Tuesday. I've been at SteeDD NFL. Go Pack Go. See you then.